Ward County is looking to get rid of its old and empty briefcases that were once used to store files by its local assessors. Files like assessment books, property cards, and tax-exempt applications were just some of the paperwork that assessors used to take around in cases like the ones you see here. Each township had its own case with its name on it. Tax Equalization Director Noreen Wilkie says since she started the position a decade ago, there were still about 2 or 3 local assessors who were using them. But now, with advanced technology, she says all files for assessors are digital, which means there's no use for these cases anymore.
I was thinking we could offer them to the townships at the equalization meetings, or the cities, the jurisdictions, because the names are all on them. If they don't want them, I was thinking of asking the Historical Society.
There's about 50 cases taking up the top shelf of the county storage. Wilkie says only one township still has a local assessor. Ward County has a total of 57 townships.